that person make meaning due to the authoritative or the I know better mentality of the facilitator, right? Oh, okay, I hear this thing. Let's not let this person tell their story. I'm going to direct it to where I think they need to go. And we see that gets people, it's really raw for people. You know, they share experiences like that, and all of a sudden someone's trying to direct them out of it into a different narrative, and they're like, that's not what I'm here to do, right? And so I was watching that develop, and our circles were really very much more peer-oriented. You know, here offering suggestions, offering advice, but not like directly like you need to do this thing, but hey, I read this book, you should check it out. And it seemed to flow a little bit better for that. People could get a little more opportunity. So it allows for the individual's meaning making, while at the same time discourse. And discourse is important, because sometimes we can go off into places where we're like, is this really what happens? This was really what's going on? So it's good to have somebody else appear there to say like, hey, have you heard of this? Have you read this book? Have you checked this out? You might want to explore this area. So that's been really interesting. And then so in the process of watching that develop over the last decade of doing these sort of in-person integration circles, I focused on my dissertation. My dissertation was looking at ayahuasca experiences in integration. And what I started to do is really kind of like dial into what even does integration mean for folks, right? There's a lot of different variations. Even in the literature, there's a lot of different reasons that people talk about what integration is, right? And for some folks, it means like applying these insights into daily life, right? And that doesn't give people the opportunity to make meaning. Sometimes they want to like complete, we're very goal oriented. So the only way to integrate is to take these insights I had and apply them, but they didn't give themselves enough time to really unpack what was going on there. So again, leaving that space for meaning making. As I was moving forward too, I started to see that there was different approaches to the paradigm and how meaning making worked. So you may have heard Piaget or other people have talked about there's sort of an assimilation, an accommodation, a transformation, and something else. So given the context of this conference, since we're all kind of here, assimilation would be something like digesting into the previous worldview, right? All these people have these really amazing, profound stories of spirit, of psychic experiences, of UFOs, of megalithic structures, Somebody that was assimilating may say, oh, that's a lot of creative stories. I really enjoyed listening to all these creative stories, but not put any sort of essence into what's actually being said. Accommodation is saying, wow, these are really profound. There might be something to this. I'm going to look into this more. So you have to expand your awareness a little bit to understand it, right? A transformation might be you're sitting in a conference or a talk about psychic experiences, and you have a spontaneous experience with somebody that you can check in later. So now you've sort of transformed your consciousness, like, oh wow, this is really possible, this could really happen. And then the beyond would be something where, at least in the research that I was doing, where basically this is all illusion created by our soul elsewhere. And so how do we make meaning when this is actually an experience of another part of ourselves, right? Now all these things come up in the process of integration. So really our in terms of the meaning making process, we're really sitting there trying to help people navigate these different terrains. Is this an experience that is best assimilated? Maybe this is about past memories, past traumas, things like that. We need to digest that in our previous worldview. Is this an experience where we need to expand our understandings? Maybe we need to do more research, maybe talk to more people, maybe do some more reading or do some more meditation or yoga, those different types of things. Is this something that's totally shattered our paradigm, right? We don't even know where to start anymore, right? So you have to sort of rebuild our paradigm. What kind of resources can we use to help that? Or is it something where we have to decide, is this reality even existing? Which is a little bit harder to work with when you're talking about meaning making, because what are we doing here? This is about the meaning of life and everything else, or the meaning of spirit. So what I found over the process, and Carlos even speaks to this too, in his process, like he went through a process and he started checking in on things. He took like some of the elements of his experience and then he looked into it a little bit more. He got some insights from somebody else. He's still asking those questions. What is cosmic loneliness? People offer those insights, a wisdom guide here. Now he has the opportunity to take that wisdom and sort of let it percolate. Plant that seed. How does it work for me? How does it feel? How does it look, And then that's our opportunity to make meaning. As we see a lot of these entheogenic experiences going toward medicalization, we have the big pharma model, the medical model, the clinical model, all of which have never really said that spirit existed over the course of their time. We always hear that it doesn't exist in that sort of rationalistic mindset, right? The mechanistic reductionist mindset. So if this is the direction of these psychedelic experiences, entheogenic experiences, which are embedded and imbued in spirit, and we're going to a space like medicalization, which doesn't believe that spirit exists, what kind of dismissal of our experience is going to happen? All of a sudden we're sitting there and we're no longer able to talk about spirit. It's just like, well, that was a neurochemical reaction in your brain, or maybe optical illusions, or maybe it's a hallucination. And so you don't really have that same sort of sense of connection, I think, to the sacred and those types of things. So as we expand and this moves towards the medicalization, I think the types of the stuff that we're doing, stuff that indigenous communities have been doing for generations, the stuff that underground communities are doing, really leaving an opportunity for the sacred, leaving the opportunity for the magical to happen for these experiences, synchronicities, all these different types of things. You're not going to see those in the medical kind of dynamic, at least as of right now, or the clinical dynamic. For people that are trying to heal traumas and all those things, highly acute situations, that's great. But we're talking about, as Carlos said, we're in the great paradigm war right now, right? Where everything wants to be reduced down to something neurological, or we can expand out into the expansion of consciousness, into the universe, into our souls, and those type of things. So how much have I been talking for? Keep going? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so I think that's really critical in terms of as we look at this sort of approach to this different type of medicines, how do we allow for that to happen, and also realize that on the second level, there's the corporatization of it all, right? And so as things are being corporatized, as more and more people are trying to make money out of the products, quote unquote products, that type of thing, that's great. But I think that we have to be a little cautious of, sometimes people will then cut corners for profit, right? You know, you have these publicly traded companies, their thing is to make profit for their shareholders no matter what, right? So what is that going to look like when they're charging $5,000 for you to sit down in a setting, which you're hearing about at some retreats now, while at the same time they're trying to get you out the door as quick as possible, right? So where's the follow-up on that? So we really try, and especially that's another thing with integration, really seeing there being a different space between the facilitator who's facilitating the experience with the individual and the person who's going to work with integration or the meaning-making process. The meaning-making process is naturally going to take significantly longer, because there's bumps, you jump through one hoop, you think you're there, you go backwards 10 steps, you do it again, you know, you don't really know how long it's going to take because it's part of this longer process. And you have to sort of do a little trial and error. Does this insight really make sense? Does it not? Is there a mistake I made? Let me go back and check that out. So I think that there's a space for integration outside and independently of some of the facilitation, because it's a lot to ask the facilitator to also work with somebody after this experience. But I think it's really important, and it's part of the conversation. And when we started this 10 years ago, like it was like you go to a conference, I don't know if anyone's been familiar with this for a while, but you go to a conference and most people are like, oh, integration, it's just people's egos talking, why are they sharing their experiences, blah, 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 like this isn't important. And then I'm like doing it in real life and being like, wow, how many people come to these circles that are super empowered by their experiences, by sharing their experiences, by being able to hear themselves share their experience once again. Sometimes we don't even have friends that can have an experience to share. They have an opportunity to share it and speak it, and all these friendships are being made. And then we go to the conferences and everyone's like poo-pooing it as like, oh, it's just that. So in the last decade, how much that's changed. In fact, now you see policy that's implementing, putting in integration. Again, if it's top-down, fear-based control integration, that's going to be kind of a scary thing, because they're inputting that meaning into the person that just had this profound, potentially hyper-suggestible experience. They're open, they're vulnerable. You have a really authoritative sort of mindset that's telling you this is what your experience means for that individual. It might become what that experience means for them, and that might not be what it actually means at the core. And so I think as we move forward, we need to be really aware of this, really keep the conversation open. We want to make sure that things stay grounded. We do that in discourse, we do that in constructive feedback, but at the same time, we don't want to sort of get carried away with trying to regulate or control or figure out this is how you do integration, because we're all, Darren was here earlier, his teacher was Clint E. out of Detroit, been doing mushrooms for decades, and he's like, I'm still a beginner, and he's doing like 30, 40 grams of mushrooms, like a lot of mushrooms, like big time mushroom journeys, and he's like, I still don't know what's going on. So for all of us to sit here and say, oh, okay, this is how you do it from a top-down regulatory framework, this is how you do it from, a medical model, and this is the approach, these are the steps. I think we have to sit back, be a little humble, and let the development of this process exist. And we do that in community. We do that from learning with each other. We do that by creating integration circles. So one thing I'm doing with Decriminalize Nature as well is helping to each city to help them support the building of their own peer integration circles And then we get feedback from them. What works, what doesn't work. Oh, we actually need a little bit more time to share. We need a little less time to share. We need less reflections, all these type of things. So I think we have to remember that we're still at the very beginning stages of a very long marathon. Things are moving pretty quickly because there's this pressure by the corporate interest, by the medicalization, by these other groups that are trying to obviously take control of it all, right? Monopolize it. You have Compass Pathways, which is a company out of England, I think, something like that. And they're trying to patent psilocybin, or the approach to psilocybin. Next, they went so far as to say, you may all already know this, but they went so far to say things like, if you're holding someone's hand in a ceremony, that's our claim. We're going to claim that. If you have the lights on a certain level, if you're on a couch, if you have some music playing, those are all our claims, right? So they're making claims of things that they have no prior art for. This has been done for hundreds, if not thousands of years for people. I mean, not the couch thing. I guess that's more as soon as the couch was invented, right? So, but yeah, so that's kind of the mentality of a lot of these publicly traded companies. What makes a publicly traded company valuable is their IP portfolio, their intellectual property. So there's this natural tendency towards trying to monopolize so they can get their shareholders to invest in this product or in their company. And then that becomes, like I say, difficult because that's also the mentality, the paradigm, which is helping people with experiences. And so we're at this, I really see kind of what we're doing, we're often kind of in this tug of war, like this paradigm, war of paradigms, right? This consciousness kind of back and forth, right? And really trying to make sure that, one, everyone can always access and grow their own. They don't have to be dependent on big pharma to create a synthetic. Two, people can learn insights, reflections, constructive feedback in community with culturally relevant community, people that know each other, people that know their background and history, not have to buy into a paradigm that may not be helpful or might actually be harmful to the different communities, but that's the authoritative and dominant paradigm, which is based on the fear and control mechanism versus the love and compassion. Three would be, we're always going to be able to share in community. It's interesting how drug policy works out. Underneath the term manufacturing is growing a plant. Well, if you say growing a plant, most people are like, yeah, you can grow a plant, no problem. When you say manufacturing, it's like, oh, that's scary, right? People are freaked out about it, so we're trying to peel that out. Other thing, in the terms of just sharing in ceremony, that goes under distribution. Again, we're trying to peel this out. So this sort of paradigm of war paradigms that we're in right now is all about words. As many of you know, words are spells. Words create reality. Words are the things that make things happen, right? So a lot of people are using these sort of scary terms, and we're trying to unpack these terms. We're trying to create new terms. We're using the word entheogen instead of psychedelic or drug or hallucinogen. Why do we use that term? Entheogen means inspiring the divinity or divine within. Right? We're really talking about this as a spiritual and a sacred experience. Psychedelic, by definition, means mind manifesting. Very easy to stay out of the sacred realm when you're saying mind manifesting. Hallucinogenic means a fundamentally unreal experience. Again, that's dismissive. You hear that a lot from medical practitioners, things like that. So, and then what other ones? Drugs. We try and stay away from drugs because we really see this as nature. Drugs have such a stigma around it, such a connotation of negativity around it. We're talking about plants that have been used for millennia. Probably even before the term drugs, as we officially know it today, even existed. But this is a word of stigma. As soon as somebody says, oh, well, I don't want to, somebody said this earlier this weekend, I don't want to deal with, I'm trying to paraphrase here, something to the effect of, I don't want to mess up my spirituality with drugs, and it's kind of an interesting concept. It's like, this is our relationship with the planet. This is our relationship with nature. This is a relationship with the plants that have grown around us for our entire lives, that our ancestors worked with, all of our ancestors across the planet, including, as Carlos is saying, the word shaman comes from northern Siberia, right, which means to know. And they're working with drum work, they're working with mushrooms and different things like that. But this word is now being used all over the place, which again homogenizes all of these varieties of voices. Is it a shaman or is it a taita? Is it an ayahuasquero? Is it a curandera? Is it somebody else out there that's doing this work? Is it maracame? There's a lot of different words that mean shaman, but you have the sort of top-down system that says everyone's a shaman. We're going to put everyone in this box here, instead of saying like, wow, there's a lot of nuance. this group believes this group believes this. That's again where that meaning making comes in. Each individual group has the opportunity to make meaning of these different things. So
take questions.
Yes. So now, thank you very
wrap
much.
Up and then we'll take questions.
Yeah, and that was pretty much it. That was all on the fly. So thank you for sticking with me as I just kind of transition through my. I think you appreciate it. And then questions for Carlos, and I'll be
or Larry
as well if you need any questions.
Any question? How are we doing on time, Alex?
I believe we have, let's go 11:30, we have another about 14 minutes.
Cool. So, any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, shoot, brother.
So I was looking at the cities, right? I'm primarily from Santa Barbara, Ventura County, I saw Los Angeles. My little brother really, he thrives as he dabbles, whatever, but I would think this is something he would be great at, to get a community, to really look at it, to help on the healing aspect. So I'm definitely going to connect, first of all, with you folks, but how does one connect, or how does one get the community or the city or the county involved?
Yeah, so decriminature@gmail.com is our email, decriminature@gmail.com. Thank you for your question. And as I mentioned before, we're a decentralized movement, so what we support the emergence of leaders around the ethos that we talked about, but it's really their own effort and leadership that enables the success. We have a handbook. It's called the Organizers Handbook, and it's on our website, which is here, decriminalizenature.org. And if you look for the Organizers Handbook and download it, it talks about our philosophy. It gives all the tools away that we've used, press releases, council resolutions. And then we'll do trainings to support people. And this is a lot of what Larry spends his time doing, so I'll let him add to this. But we support people with kind of guidance along the way. Okay, did you do this? Did you do this? Have you tried calling this council member? That kind of thing, so that they always have sort of someone there to go back to and say, okay, I'm getting a little lost here. What do I do now? So maybe you could pick it up from there, Larry.
Yeah, definitely. As Carlos said, make the contact. We'll give you the handbook, all the information. We start setting up meetings. There's also a group here in SoCal, which is at the table. So there's a bunch of people, Long Beach, Santa Monica, other places in LA that are coming together trying to get this. So there's now a community here that there's always good for feedback and having meetings and little events they're doing and things like that. Really important. I would have, once they contact us, we can give them more details. It gets a little granular, to use your term to use, at that point in time. But it's basically research your city council, figure out if you have an ally, start talking to them. Even if nothing passes, if you can start engaging with the city council member and educating them on why these are potentially beneficial, that's a big part of the work we're doing. Right. A lot of the policy is the important part, of course, but the education is the primary part, but we don't really talk about it too much. And of course, the consciousness aspect, that's the hidden, hey, everybody, we're trying to help change consciousness here, but we can't really say that to city council members, Yeah. So just reach out and we'll help you out some more on that. Yeah. Or connect with the table downstairs. There's going to be the Decrim SoCal folks will be there all day. So.
And in terms of strategy, this brings up a good point. We've chosen a bottom-up strategy, which is also part of our ethos and practice. We believe that if you start by converting city councils to decriminalize first, they become the allies in the community to go to the state, and that's actually proven true. In a lot of the cities where we're decriminalizing, some of the beneficiaries who are now engaging in plant medicine because of the increased awareness are first participating in the ceremony and then becoming our allies in decriminalization at the state level, which is what's happening in Michigan, for example. What we're also seeing in cities like Oakland that have decriminalized, Ann Arbor, is this really beautiful culture emerging of working with plant medicines, particularly throughout the entire cities, but particularly in marginalized communities of color, Latino communities, immigrant communities. People are now starting to grow their own mushrooms. So by some estimates, up to 5,000 people are now growing mushrooms in Oakland and sharing with friends. Some of the leaders, particularly social justice leaders in Oakland, who have really dealt with a lot of trauma because they're on the front lines of trying to save people who are in deep struggle, are also sitting in ceremony, learning how to work with plant medicines, and then sharing that with their base. So cities, for us, it was a really good decision to start city by city as opposed to trying to go straight to the state and change legislation. So if your brother is interested, we'd love to get his help in his city. Yeah. Same for anybody here who wants to organize in their local city. We're here to support you and out there.
And it's really easy to do it where you don't have to be fully in. Testimonials are great. Hey, I had this beautiful experience, it transformed my life. That's like, gets right into the heart area for these city council members. But there are a lot of people who are leaders who are like, hey, I don't think that somebody should be arrested for growing a plant or a mushroom or having an experience. And here's the research that shows that. And you can do that without being directly connected. So for folks, if you're like, okay, maybe it's a little still controversial here, you can still kind of organize, you can still move forward as sort of an independent, not having personal experiences, or you can dive fully in and say, hey, this is how it transformed my life, and it has a lot of meaning to it. So keep that in mind too, because I know some people are, concerned or not concerned about that in terms of their own personal connection to this work.
Other questions, thoughts? You can also share a comment. Yes.
Just one, as I saw the slide earlier, did you say that the whole state of Oregon is decriminalized?
Well, Oregon legalized a psilocybin therapy model, which is a closed system. And so thank you for raising that. So Oregon has legalized a model which requires eventually the creation of synthetics as the tool. Why? Because in a therapeutic setting, when you have government, which is, I think this is the Oregon Health Authority, the Oregon Health Authority is regulating it. And so that means they're liable for implementation of this program. And so when you have liability that flows into the government arena, now you have a desire for high control. So what that means is that they have to control dose, and it's hard to control, and strength of the dose, and so it's hard to control that with natural plants. So what's happening in Oregon now is that they're trying to figure out how to implement the program, which ranges, we've heard cost ranges $700 to a couple $1,000s for the therapy session. But it's also creating a closed loop private interest system that benefits from reduction of abundance. In other words, if more and more people can't grow their own mushrooms, then it means more and more people will go to the closed therapeutic model. And so we're seeing a crackdown on the Grow, Gather, Gift model in Oregon. In fact, there was recently announced someone who was arrested for growing mushrooms. And so we're concerned about that. We don't see Oregon as a good model. Because we believe we have to lead with decriminalization. It's the most vulnerable way for people to access plant medicines is in a direct relationship, because it's not a commodification model, it's a personal sovereignty model. But Oregon did legalize therapeutic model. California is in a very, very interesting place right now, because the senator who sponsored SB 519 initially led with a full decriminalization for entheogens and some psychedelics, and setting up a task force to look at legalization. It was started, though, by the same group that pushed Prop 64, which by many accounts has been a problem and in many ways a disaster for the natural medicinal plant medicine relationship people had before the cannabis Prop 64 model. And so this group is the one leading SB 519. So you have the fox in the hen house, and they have now figured out how to put limits into our relationship with nature, which is what we're going to be working against, to remove the limits. Because with limits and then this task force, it's pretty clear what will happen down the road is this task force will decrease limits more and more for us, and that will reduce our ability to have abundance in our relationship with nature. One of the other cool things that's forming, though, is a coalition is forming to advocate for the broader community. And so joining Decriminalize Nature, which we're happy to have allies in this fight. So a lot of interesting stuff happening at the state level right now. No state has fully decriminalized entheogens. We just recently introduced a bill in Michigan and in Colorado to fully decriminalize entheogens, and in Michigan to reduce penalties on substance use. It's on the Schedule 1 list.
And to clarify what Carlos means by fully decriminalized, because there is also M110 in Oregon, which decriminalized all substances, but they put limits on mushrooms. And as I mentioned earlier, the manufacturing and the distribution part, it's still a felony to grow a mushroom in Oregon. So Carlos was saying earlier about how you have to go through M109 now, because M110, we were told, oh, well, this will decriminalize and help with everybody else. We'll do the legalized therapy here, but they forgot to add in the cultivation part. You can't pick a mushroom and grow. You can't do them at your house, technically, according to these, You can't microdose. There's a big conversation going on about microdosing through M109, right? Also, the limitations for mushrooms was, for example, 13 grams of substance in, A detectable amount of psilocybin, 13 grams of a mixture or substance, meaning if you had a microdosing in a chocolate bar, 13-gram chocolate bar that had a minute amount of psilocybin but detectable, that would be arrestable, still a misdemeanor. You know, so there's some equity holes. They actually just put in this new policy legislation, I think last week, to say, oh, we need to fix the equity holes in Oregon. And so this is something like, let's not have to go back and fix all the holes. Let's just start off on the ground level with this decriminalization, make it move forward. Decriminalization, full decriminalization, Carlos said, grow, gather, gift model, no limitations on a personal ability to grow as many as you want, that type of thing. Because then it's just an arbitrary amount to say, okay, you're a criminal here at 0.1 grams over, but here you're not. Well, what's the difference, right? You know, so.
All right, anything else? Thank you all. Been a pleasure.
Let's give a round of applause.
Thank you, Alex.
Appreciate it.
You want a water?
I have one in my backpack. This is all theirs.
Huh? Yeah, they got my IP.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Is there anybody in the LA area that facilitates ketamine or mushroom experiences?
So we have a table down on the first floor. And if you come there, we introduce you to our leaders. Something you're going to probably have to find in a clinic.
Yeah, there's a ketamine place in Montana for $500 a shot. For $2,000 for 4. I thought that was stiff. Thank you.
Yeah, come to our table. We'll introduce you.
Down on the first floor?
First floor, yeah, in the exhibitors booth area. I was raised by youngest 4 cousins, and my father was a top fighter. I am and that's part of our culture. So all my cousins used to put me on like the littlest one to fight my other cousin in the street, like the rooster, to fight neighborhood kids. My brother used to kick my ass. He's 7 years old. He used to kick my ass to train me to be able to go out and fight in the streets. Be strong. I used to be ashamed of that because I had like this really intense, fight mode. Warrior mode, right? They were training me to protect the tribe, man. They were training me to protect a little things. This is where it comes from, you know what I mean? Like they were,
You know, 1 or 2 things out there for people walking by when the door closes.
Trainers to defend our people against invasion.
So yeah, this isn't really my ideal situation here.
So
The speaker,
suddenly I was like,
We're
I
gonna-
of that.
this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this thing to the best of our ability. Because I'm gonna do a sonic alchemy journey, so this is what we're. Yeah.
Hello guys, I am your room manager, Alex.
Hello, Alex.
If you guys
So
need, let me
sorry
know.
for barging
Don't
in.
even worry.
I didn't even read the sign.
Don't worry.
What did you say?
I just barged right in on the last
Saw
one.
you last night as well, so you guys come. Do you need to tap in here or anything?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I got two components. Well, actually, we don't have one component. I was going to do a presentation, but
Okay.
half hour ago it all got deleted, so I'm probably not going to do that. But I'm going to do the second half of this. I'm going to do like a sound frequency experience.
Got it. Beautiful.
So I'll probably, this is all we have for speaker, right?
Yes, unfortunately.
Okay. I'm going to do a little sound check on it then. I did bring like my aux cables, so I'd like to run that through here.
Check, 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 1, 2. Check, 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 1, 2, 1, 2.